Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Welcome to Build. From a column on Vice.com to a web show on Vice.com to a column on Vogue to a show on Viceland and now a book, Karley Sciortino, aka Slutever, has really shown us the ins and outs of all the different kinds of sex you can have all over the world. We're gonna take a look at a clip from her show on Viceland, and then she's gonna come out. Let's take a look at a clip right now from Slutever.
Hi.
Hello.
Do you think that you're qualified to be my lifestyle slave? Are you slutty?
Yes.
Same.
Everyone's horny. But why are we all so weird about it? I'm on a journey to find slutty enlightenment. And maybe get some action myself.
Do you think that there's a lot of women out there who would love to pay for a happy ending but it's not available to them?
Who doesn't want that?
What's your sexual fantasy?
I want to have sex in a public place.
She's deep. What exactly does it mean to be an ecosexual?
Feel of dirt, being super erotic, and I get especially turned on by trees.
In the end, we all just want to be loved for the freaks that we are. Later, sluts.
Everybody, please welcome Karley Sciortino, aka Slutever.
It's a good trailer.
Karley, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I was so excited.
So my first question is, when talking about this stuff, I've talked to you before. We used to talk on HuffPost Live all the time.
Yeah.
And I love talking to you about your work. It's always fascinating and titillating. But I always find it interesting talking about this stuff because we're still kind of talking about it in this sort of shameful way. You know, we're so fascinated by the different ways we can have sex because it's all still kind of so shocking to us. Do you think it shouldn't be shocking? We should reach a point where none of this is shocking and it just sort of is?
I do think that you're right, that the idea of a woman specifically having agency over her sexuality or who says, you know, I have sex without shame is still shocking in 2018, which you feel like it shouldn't be, right? But I think that there is always going to be a part of sex that's taboo and that's unpredictable and sort of scary. And that's not necessarily bad because I think that we don't want sex to be boring, right? All of these things make sex exciting, but I think that we should be able to have different types of sexual desires, different sexual behaviors, and that women should be able to talk about sex openly and have that not be something that they are shamed for. And I hope that this book can be part of that conversation.
Well, you have this great quote from Camille Paglia in the beginning of the book, or near the beginning of the book, and it's in reference to Madonna. And she says, there can be no transgression without limits. I'm paraphrasing here. And I think that's fascinating because so much of what you're doing is breaking boundaries and breaking these taboos and showcasing our limits. But what happens if we end up if we actually lose those limits?
Well, I love that quote, and she's talking specifically about Madonna in relation to her growing up Catholic, as I did, and this idea that, you know, subversion needs limits to violate, where, you know, if you're told no, no, no all the time, that something becomes a little bit more exciting and thrilling because it's like off limits. And a big part of the book is redefining the idea of the slut. And I'm really specific in the book when I say I don't necessarily just want to flip the meaning of slut from something that's bad and shameful to something that's like entirely positive. Because I do think that there's something that's sort of naughty about being a slut that I think that we want to retain. You know, I think we want to reclaim it and we want to have it be a tool for women to feel sort of like powerful and agent in their sexuality, but we want to retain that kind of like unpredictable, naughty, transgressive element of sluthood because
for so many people, transgression is desirable in and of itself. It is attractive to be transgressive, or it can be a turn-on. I mean, infidelity in a lot of ways, that's one of the big turn-ons about it, is that it's transgressive. You're transgressing this bond that you have with someone else. So what do you do when you sort of lose that boundary of transgression?
I feel like we can cross that bridge when we come to it, but I feel like we're not close.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I think it's still transgressive now to just say, I'm a woman who has multiple sexual partners. You know, for so long in the media, sort of, it's been ubiquitous that the representation of the slut or a woman who has multiple sexual partners, or even just a woman who's openly sexual, the sort of narrative that woman plays in movies and books and TV is that she often, in the end, literally dies, right? So it's not a coincidence that in basically every horror movie ever made, the girl who has sex or the slutty girl is the first to get like eaten by the zombies and stabbed.
Jason like drives a pickaxe through her body,
Yeah.
splits her in half while she's having sex or something.
Yeah, no, yes, and it's
It's a real scene in a real horror movie. Sorry.
Yes.
That was so disturbing.
And the Drew Barrymore in Scream, right, where she's the sexual girl and she has her, you know, her nipples are hard and then she gets
Stabbed in
murdered.
the heart.
Yes.
In the fucking heart.
I know. And it's also, I mean, Hester Prynne, like the OG high priestess of slut shaming, right? Like the adulteress. And these narratives, the punished slut narrative is really ubiquitous. So there's very few female characters in media that transcend that narrative. Like Samantha from Sex and the City is one of the only women really that we see who's representative as being a hypersexual woman who has a job, who is in control of her life, who's happy. So often we see the alternative, and in real life as well. People like the Duke porn star and Monica Lewinsky. These are these women who are representative as being sexual and then essentially shamed or slut shamed off campus or whatever it is.
I think there's also a more subtle shaming as well that's done in pop culture narratives. And I would say even a show, which is a show I love and I think is overwhelmingly a positive show, is something like Girls, where sexual activity oftentimes is characterized as something missing within the person, as like a deep sadness that they have and a hole that they're trying to fill, rather than just something that they enjoy and are experiencing. Do you find that narrative a lot as well?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean,
essentially the narrative, like, oh, you're a slut. You must be missing something that I have because I'm not a slut, kind of thing.
yeah, I think, and that is the point where sexual behavior is gendered, right? Because it's interesting. We know that there's a sexual double standard, right? Like men are sort of glorified for having multiple sexual partners, where women are vilified for the same thing. But I read about in the book that actually both genders are criticized for having multiple sexual partners, but in different ways. So often, for a man, it's, oh, you're sort of an unethical player type. You're sort of like an unethical guy, one would think. But for a woman, it's often, there's something missing in your life and you're filling that hole like through your vagina, basically. Like that there's something fundamentally wrong with your brain. Like, what's your childhood trauma? And often we think, we tell women that they couldn't just want to have a lot of sex for fun, like guys do, but that it must be because there's something missing in your life, like you're depressed, or you're like ugly and can't get a boyfriend. You know what I mean? Like, what are you trying to get through this? Because it can't just be fun.
Because you can't land a man for real, so you just have to sort of give it away for cheap. That sounds horrible, but that's not my thought. That's the bad person's thought. That
I'm mimicking
right
the
now.
bad person.
I always just, when I talk to people who have multiple sexual partners, I just immediately think, oh, that sounds exhausting.
Yeah.
It's not even a judgment. It's just like, I don't know how you fucking juggle that.
Same. I could never be poly because having one partner is so emotionally exhausting for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like my friends who are poly, like their iCals are crazy. Like they actually schedule sex and schedule I'm like, do you schedule arguments? Because like managing two people's emotional needs seems so hard. But I
imagine if you go poly, or if that's the lifestyle that you live, there's a part of you that very much enjoys. Obviously, I'm speculating, but there's a part of you that enjoys the emotional play that comes with a relationship so much that you would want it with multiple people, that you enjoy those conversations so much. Whereas I don't need them that much. I don't want them that much.
like I try to avoid, I'm avoidant.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, levels of something else I read about in the book is non-monogamy, and obviously how this has become increasingly a part of the conversation in our culture, or just like the idea that maybe it's a good idea for some people, right? In Sex at Dawn, obviously the famous book, who argues that maybe monogamy is not a sort of biological, is not in our biology, but I do think that people are experimenting more with non-monogamy in smaller ways. Like polyamory is like the most extreme version, right? Where you're in love with multiple people, you have multiple actual boyfriends or girlfriends, whatever. But no, I don't think I could do it because it's exhausting. But I've tried open relationships, and that was also a nightmare as well. But
how was that? Can I ask, how was that a nightmare without you exposing your personal life too much?
Oh, I like professionally expose my personal life, so it's fine. It was really difficult for me because it's so vulnerable. So it seems the most obvious, like, why would you put yourself in a position where you're allowing your partner to sleep with someone else? And I think that at the time I was weighing sort of like what I was getting out of it versus what I was losing. And I was sort of saying, I really want to keep exploring my sexuality. I want my sexual freedom. And for that, I'll sacrifice the sort of sinking heart feeling I get when I know my partner sleeps with someone else. And it was hard for me because, I mean, I'm sort of going on a personal tangent, but in my last relationship, we decided to be open from the beginning. And I don't think that we had built a level of like trust enough when we started it, so that I was constantly worried that they were going to like leave me for their other partners, because I didn't feel like we had like built something together that was strong enough to then incorporate other people and other feelings. And I know that for some people, being open right from the beginning is what they think is best for them. But I feel like if I was ever going to try that again, I would want to feel so close with that person. And then the conversation around bringing in other people and other feelings felt like less threatening, you know?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. But I'm curious, do you think oftentimes the judgment that is placed on, I would say, sexual activity outside of the norm, let's say, a monogamous relationship, whether it's gay or straight, do you think oftentimes the judgment that is placed on those things outside of the norm that I've just defined is simply because other people don't experience that? You know what I mean? Like, it's this idea that like an open relationship is like, oh God, I would never do that. They're in an open relationship. And it's just simply because I don't do that. I, for some reason, place some kind of judgment on that. It's like a natural instinct that it seems like people have to judge the sexual activity of others.
Completely. And I think that it feels threatening to sort of the natural order.
Yes,
You know what I mean?
That's kind of what it is. It oddly feels threatening.
Yeah, and sometimes, especially when you're in a new relationship and you're newly monogamous and you're trying to make it work, and then sometimes you hear like, oh, this other couple and they're swingers and they have threesomes, and you're like, am I boring? Like, what's wrong with me? Like, is monogamy over? Like, and then, and I do think that we know from studies that many people judge people who are in non-monogamous relationships, and like not only do they think that they judge their sexual behavior, but also because of sort of this psychological effect called the halo effect, when they are judged negatively in other elements of their lives. So often people who are in non-monogamous relationships are then perceived to be like less moral across the board, like less good at their job, just like worse people. So this is something that clearly we think of as being very threatening to our society for some reason.
Well, we've built this entire society up on certain power structures, and those power structures we've internalized, and it's really hard to hear that they can be broken so easily by just a little bit of will.
I know, and I think that it's smart that we're talking about non-monogamy and just like what that means for people and relationships, and like like how realistic it is to be monogamous long term. I think it's good to have those conversations because I think that like having conversations around things reduces shame and anxiety. But I also don't think that that is right for everyone. I think that it's very, very hard. And monogamy is hard as well, but with monogamy, there's one rule. It's basically like, don't sleep with anyone else. With non-monogamy, there's like endless rules that are constantly being negotiated and renegotiated, and you have to fully talk through, check in with your partner all the time. And
well, one would argue that's how you maintain a healthier relationship than a monogamous relationship, is because you're fluidly talking about the relationship consistently.
Yes, you are forced to do that. And if you are up to the task, I think it can be like a great option for some people. And also what I've been told I know a lot of people who are open and swingers, etc., and they say it's not for life, right? So you can make a decision with your partner, like, let's try an open relationship. And then if it doesn't work out, in a year from now, you could be like, let's not be in an open relationship anymore. You know what I mean? It's not like you're making a commitment to do that forever. It could just be a period of exploration that both of you want and need, and then it can be over.
Hopefully what happens during that open relationship doesn't affect the relationship when it's not open anymore. And
so you have PTSD like forever.
Exactly. Am I better than him? Something like that. Talk to me about the show on Viceland. You'd been doing the Slutever show for a little while as a web series on Vice a few years ago. I don't think you'd made it in a little while, right? Up until...
Yeah, so I created the show with director-producer who I work with named Adrienne Murguia, and we've been making the show on for Vice.com, we started in like 2012, and we did a season, and then we did another season a couple years ago, and now it's sort of in its mature, fully formed version for Viceland, Vice's TV channel, and it's a documentary series that essentially explores sexual behavior in a funny and light way, which we hope is sort of like a nice breath of fresh, relaxing air in sort of like the current quite tense sexual climate we live in right now.
And I feel like one of the things that is different about your show than any other show that explores sex is you kind of participate a little bit in what you're exploring here and there, or you have participated in the past. Can you talk about navigating that with your producers and sort of what you want to do and what you want to do on camera and everything like that?
Yeah, it's definitely an endless, it's a conversation. I mean, I've never been great at objective journalism, so to speak. I've never been great at sitting on the sidelines and sort of watching things from a distance. I love jumping into a world and experiencing it firsthand. And I think that for a viewer, that's really great because I feel like I'm almost like the surrogate for the viewer a lot of time where I'm like, what is this thing like? So for example, our first episode was about happy endings and like, why aren't happy ending massages available to women? Like, you know what I mean? Like there's all of these. In New York, we found out during our research that there's more happy ending massage parlors than there are bars in New York, but like...
Fucking way.
Yeah.
Why can't I find one? No, I'm kidding.
I can help you find one. But all these services are for men, and I was like, well, in the name of gender equality, like I want to be jerked off by a stranger, you know what I mean? So we had to, fly to San Francisco, which is like where that would happen, obviously. But
I love the guy that you interview in this episode. Sorry to interrupt. That says that I just don't think a woman would want this. Essentially, it says a woman's brain or desire functions so much differently than a man's. She couldn't get off by a stranger. Just like fuck you, dude.
I know. I think that probably, I believe in gender differences, and probably there are more men that are looking for that. Just in terms of supply and demand, it seems like that is the case. But I do think that there must be some women who are looking for it. I've heard you can find a lot of them in Russia. So, but like, yeah, very slutty friend. She goes to Russia for that. But like, she's from Eastern Europe. But
specifically for that,
yeah,
she flies all the way to Russia
to get hand jobs. Yeah. She's desperate. No, like, but it's complicated because, yeah, I remember that was the first episode that aired, and I did literally traveling across America, like trying to get jerked off by strangers, and like my parents were triggered by that. I had to warn them in advance.
Well, they've been triggered for quite some time by your work, right?
Permanently triggered.
Yeah.
But
have they opened up to it more and more?
Oh yeah, I think that they're happy. I mean, they're just old school. I think that they're just like impressed that I'm on TV. but also sort of have to repeatedly reconcile what I'm talking about with their ideas about monogamy and religion and morality. Exactly. But I think I really like the experiential component of the show because I feel like I get to try that you don't have this sort of, especially when it comes to sex, and these issues are so sensitive that you're not just being like, this thing is weird. Oh my God, you have dragon dildos? Like, creepy, you know what I mean? Yeah. The whole point of the show is we're kind of just like, okay, let's look at these things that people often consider taboo or strange or gross and give them another try and be like, where's the humanity in this? How can I relate to this? And I think diving into these worlds and experiencing them firsthand is a wonderful way to relate to them and find the desire and humanity in these sexual behaviors.
So wait, did you find your massage?
I found a guy on Craigslist, surprise, surprise, who...
In San Francisco or in New York?
In New York.
Okay.
Dr. M, you can Google him. He comes over to your house and brings a massage table, and he, gives you essentially a happy ending massage. And he gave another one to my friend who is a very successful escort. So she has had a lot of sex, and she gives him a 5-star review.
Wait, is a famous escort or just?
No, I said famous.
Oh, okay.
Like, famous in sort of the escort world, I suppose you could say.
Right, that's most of us aren't gonna know.
Ho Twitter, yeah, she's got a lot of Twitter followers. She does.
Were you worried that when he came over, he wasn't going to be attractive enough? Did that matter? Like, what were your thoughts about that?
I mean, he was dressed like a white rapper. He looked like Eminem's dad. I was like, what? It was so weird. He was in a fully white sweatsuit. It was like this small little Jewish man from Long Island. I was like, what? It was funny. I I didn't get to we didn't complete the process with him because a lot of these things, there's a camera crew in the room, right? So like for part of the show, I had sex with a male sex doll, and people are always like, was it good? Like, did you get off? I was like, well, there was like 10 people in the room. So I was a little distracted, but I'm sure I could have gotten, he was great. You know what I mean? I need some private time with the sex doll.
What was the sex doll's name?
Gabriel.
Gabriel.
Yeah, like the angel Gabriel. Like that's what I don't know. I didn't name him.
So I want to go back to this little Jewish white rapper man. It's very funny to me.
Yeah.
That so he's doing this in front of the camera crew and everything. Yeah. And you were essentially like, okay, I get the gist. Like, it's not gonna happen for me. Let's move on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was
disappointed.
I think he was disappointed, and there was another jerk-off artist in San Francisco who was disappointed as well. Where I was like, I'm not gonna get there right now. Like, I think that they wanted to prove to me that their
of course, this is their job.
Yeah, like that they provided a full service, and I was just like,
you wanted to
it's
do a
for
good
TV.
job.
I know. I was like, maybe we can have another session privately, but it just felt a little. I'm a girl, you know what I mean? So in order for me to come during a sexual experience, I'm like, everyone has to be quiet. Like you know what I mean? Like the air conditioner has to turn off.
A lot of focus.
Yeah, like I did laser focus. So I'm not gonna get there in that scenario.
Talk to me, but I'm curious before we go to audience questions, and I think you talk a little bit about this in the book. The moment you realized that this was for you, exploring your sexuality indefinitely or for the time being was for you and how you wanted to live your life, and when you were comfortable with it.
Well, it kind of goes back to what you were saying about transgression and limits. I think I grew up in a really conservative Catholic family, so for me, sex was a way of being provocative and of transgressing, of being rebellious. And because it was sort of the limit, the no for me. And I think that it was when I was in late teens and early 20s, I started to realize that sex gave me a lot of confidence. I liked the attention. I felt like it was a shortcut to intimacy for me. I felt like it was a way in which, it sounds stupid and silly to say, but it was like something that I was like good at weirdly. I was like, oh, I feel comfortable in this situation. You know what I mean? It's just like anything. Like some people like painting, like some people like running. I was like, oh, this makes me feel comfortable. I like connecting with people. I also just like the types of conversations that you can have sometimes with people after you have sex with them. It's like this little bubble where you become suddenly more open and you get like the full access to someone or closer than you would just talking to them in a bar. Sex has been additive to my life in a lot of ways. And in the book, I talk about how, I don't just think that being a slut means like having a high body count. You have to like sleep with everyone in a room. It's a mindset, and it's about thinking of sex as something that's positive and additive to your life and seeking visceral experiences through sex, which means that you can be slutty and single and sleeping around, but you can also be slutty within a relationship if you're saying like, I feel so comfortable with you. I want to explore types of sex with you that I have never had with anyone else. Like, let's push our boundaries together. Like, I think that that's like slutty.
And there's a section of the book, a small part, really, and I think in your introductory chapter, where you talk about victimhood when it comes to sex, which is, it's really difficult to talk about. It's like a really difficult issue to navigate, and I thought you did a wonderful job at it. But this idea that a bad sexual experience doesn't necessarily mean you are a victim. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was a hard part to write, and I like really worked through that with my editor, Maddie Caldwell. It was just like landmine, like, you know what I mean? Because you really can't talk about victimization these days without sort of like a Twitter rage. But I do think that it's an important conversation to have, because I think that a lot of times if a sexual situation does not go perfectly, or if feelings are hurt at the end of it, that the way that we look at it is like the woman was the victim and like the man was the predator, or that like a woman lost something, a part of herself, but sort of like men don't really have to deal with sort of negativity after a sexual experience that doesn't go well. And I think that those feelings come from this really outdated idea that we have that when having sex, men are getting something, whereas women are giving something up. And I think that that's really, if we could sort of erase that and think of sex as an experience where two people come together and both have as much to gain as they have to lose, then we would stop thinking of it like that. I mean, if you look at media and how it portrays sex, there is almost no type of sex that a man can have in a movie that's like bad or negative or will make him feel bad about himself. Like even like the worst sex you ever see a guy have in a movie is like he's tricked into bed with like a really fat woman or something, and then afterward it's like jokes with friends. But if a woman was tricked into sex in a movie, like she would like immediately start self-harming. You know what I mean? It's like we don't allow, I think that we need to teach women that going on a bad date or like being treated sort of mean or like having sex with a guy who doesn't go down on you or is just like selfish, like that doesn't mean that you're broken. It doesn't mean you're a victim. It doesn't mean that, it just means that
You had bad sex.
you had bad sex. Yeah. And like, you know what? Going forward, you guess what? You learn something about yourself. Going forward, you'll be.
You learn something about that person too. Like
Right.
oftentimes we learn about people when we have sex with them, And it's insane to be like, well, when I had sex with this person, they turned out completely different than I thought that they were. Well, as long as there was no one actually getting physically hurt here. Yeah, it turns out they were a selfish person, and that's something that happens.
Totally. And I think that there's like this huge gap between assault and discomfort, which we now are suddenly beginning to sort of like have a nuanced conversation about. But like someone can be sort of an asshole to you during a sexual experience, and you have to be able to be like, I'm getting out of here.
Yes.
Like if you want.
I don't like that. Please. Oh, okay. I won't do that.
Exactly. And
Not me. This isn't about my sex life.
but like, I think that if women want to be able to have sex like men, not be slut shamed, and be thought of as sexual equals, that we have to be able to be like, no, I don't want that. You're being an asshole. I'm leaving. You know what I mean? It's like, in what part of a sexual experience on a date, like does the man become the predator and the woman become the victim? You know what I mean? Like barring actual assault, I think that women have to be able to stand up for themselves a lot more and just not be like so sexually fragile. Like I need to be able to like deal with an asshole sometimes and then walk away from it and be like, next time I'm going to be careful and sleep with a guy who acts like that,
Absolutely. Let's get some questions from our audience. Who has a question?
Hi, thank you for being here.
Thanks.
I'm enthralled by this conversation. It's like such a good interview.
Thanks.
Thanks. I was wondering, are there any like sex positive women in your life that inspire your work, whether you know them or in this social climate?
That's great. So one of the best books about sex positive culture that I ever read was by Carol Queen, and it's called Real Live Nude Girl. And she's a sexologist and a former sex worker, and the book is just so funny. It explores everything from her being a sex worker to spanking fetishes to telling. The book opens with her a letter to her mom that's like, "Dear Mom, I'm a whore," and her like explaining to her mom that she's a whore basically. And it's just so funny and light, and I love that about it because I feel like a lot of times when we have conversations around sex and feminism, it can be so heavy, and I just like so refreshing to find women who write about sex in a way where they're like self-aware, they're making fun of themselves. I just feel like she's the ultimate anti-victim. You know what I mean? I also love Xaviera Hollander. I'm sort of maybe butchering her name, but she wrote a book called The Happy Hooker. Like a lot of prostitute-related books right now, but she talks about her life as a prostitute, and it's just like she had so much fun, and I just love that sort of message of just like I am not fragile. Like here are all the things I did. Some of them are horrible, some of them are super funny, but like I had a lot of fun along the way, and I learned so much about myself.
Next question.
Hi. So I was reading an article you wrote about traditional gender roles, where like some like guys are still sometimes expected to pick up a check or just play the dominant role. Do you feel that some of those roles will still continue or change, especially like in the gay community or gender fluid relationships, where or feminist relationships where some of those roles are not needed anymore? Or
Right. So that was a tricky article. I basically was asking, can I be a, hashtag empowered feminist and still like it when a guy picks up the check on a date? Because I feel like in this era, subscribing to traditional gender norms can sometimes, people are like, well, why aren't you woke? You know what I mean? Like, I want to be a stay-at-home mom, or I'm a woman who likes to be submissive, or I like it when my boyfriend puts a coat on my back, that kind of stuff. And I was just sort of asking, can I like those things and still be a feminist? And and I think that there we should have room for sort of gender parity, you might call it. I guess that just like what I strive to be in is a relationship that feels equal, where we both respect each other, but that within that like mutual respectful relationship, that like I'm able to sort of play this sort of hyper feminine, submissive girl sometimes. You know what I mean? Like I don't think that we. Basically, just what I was saying is I don't think that we should have to be like empowered all the time. It's exhausting. You know what I mean? Like that being feminine is powerful and being submissive can be powerful.
Yeah, and I think giving into, I mean, look, at our certain age, we are not at the part of the millennial age that everything is kind of breaking apart and becoming different for us. There is still a part in our brains, I think, that is gendered and is attracted to certain things because of societal standards and what we grew up with. And you can't just sort of get rid of those things right away. That as long as we're aware of it, that's okay. I think it's okay to live by these things.
That's so true. And I think it's about self-awareness, because my brother, so I'm 32, my brother is 27, and even that age difference, I'm like, everyone he dates is a they. You know what I mean? I was like, I get, like, and then so for us, being in your early 30s, like, we grew up with all these examples of love and romance that were like the prince and the princess, you know what I mean? And you understand that these things are completely antiquated and sort of not what we should be aspiring to be like, but they're still in your brain. It's like you can't just erase everything you've ever seen about love and relationships. So it's about being aware, like, okay, I've had some outdated gender roles be a huge influence on the way I see relationships, but like, how do I break those down while also being able to like do like a sex role play where I'm like calling someone daddy or something.
Specifically that. Yeah. Next question.
Hi. I was wondering, after seeing all these different types of ways of being with another person, what do you think defines a successful relationship?
Oh my God, it's so hard. Trying to figure it out. I think the thing about relationships is I think that almost any type of relationship can work as long as you both want the same thing. So for me, success in a relationship is being able to find someone who I think respects me for me and who I respect for them, and that we like allow ourselves like the freedom to be who we are, while also like where someone makes you feel like really known and understood and supported, but also gives you enough independence to just like be who you are. This sounds so cheesy, but like I feel like I'm learning, you know, we grew up in this time where like independence is paramount, right? Especially for a woman, it's like, don't sacrifice your career for a man, like don't become a we, like stay an I, you know, be an independent woman, like don't take your husband's last name or whatever it is. But throughout that, I think it's important. I have to constantly be reminding myself like, well, you know what, a successful relationship ideally means that someone is changing you for the better and that you are just like, it's about mutual support, I think. That's such a like old school answer.
No, a successful relationship is an old school answer. I mean, it's not even really that old school though. It's like an answer of the last like 30 years, because before that it was like horrible what a successful relationship was to society. It's like, listen to your man. That's it. That's what a successful relationship was like more than 30 years ago. But I think what you're saying, it's classic for a reason. It's like classic advice for a reason. Grow together, be open and fluid, and that's about it.
And be able to talk. I think finding a dude who is emotionally articulate is really the goal. And also being emotionally articulate yourself. That's my goal for myself.
Speaking as a dude who is emotionally articulate, we are not that articulate still. We still have moments where we're like, fuck, no, just, ah.
I know, I feel like that too. The other day I was talking with my boyfriend and we were talking about, oh my God, like, being in a relationship is just like continuously crashing up against your, like the thing, like your inadequacy, like the things that you can't say, like your jealousy, your emotional inarticulateness. It's just like, it really is hard. Being in a relationship is really hard.
A good relationship is, if you have a series of long relationships or bad relationships that don't work out, you are constantly remembering that they didn't work out for a few reasons that has to do with you. And you blame yourself, even if the other person did something bad. And a good relationship is when you can confront all of those things and be like, oh, but we're working on this together. Like this thing that ended a relationship before or made me leave a relationship before is actually something that we're kind of cool with and know how to talk about. That's what I've always...
That is so true. And just like working through your old trauma, like I was in a relationship where I felt really critiqued and where like someone was sort of like verbally kind of abusive to me, like put me down. And so now anytime like the slightest critique, I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, what does that mean? You don't like me, you're critiquing me, I can't deal with it. And it's like, I need to sort of understand that not your partner isn't just like the worst version, isn't just like a combination of all the bad things about your other partners put together.
But your partner also has to be sensitive enough to know that that is a history for you and that you are reacting a certain way, not necessarily because of them, but because of something that happened to you, and they need to kind of phrase their critique maybe in a way that takes all of that into consideration.
True. You know, I think you should be a therapist. That's like your like side hustle. Yeah. Like a Craigslist therapist.
Anybody? It's about $25 for 30 minutes up there. I'll be up there right after this. Karley, it's always a pleasure to see you. Wonderful to talk to you. Slutever is on Viceland. What nights can people check it out?
Wednesdays at 10 p.m.
And some of the episodes are online if people want to go watch some of them there.
Yes, there's one episode online, and then like our history of the web series is online too.
Absolutely. And the book is on shelves now?
Yes, today.
Oh, amazing. Congratulations, everybody. Give Karley a round of applause. Let's hear it.
Thank you.